At the family gathering, Dad raised his glass and declared, "Your sister made partner, while you're still playing entrepreneur." Laughter rippled around the room, and I felt my stomach twist at the public humiliation. But then, Mom leaned forward, her tone sharp and unwavering, and the words she said next changed the entire atmosphere in seconds. "I'm Rachel, and honestly, can you imagine pouring your entire soul into something, watching it bleed you dry, only for your own family to gather for an intervention, ready to declare you a pathetic failure?" That's exactly where I was, just last month, at 30 years old, facing down my family as they ambushed me about my failing tech startup. The room was tense, suffocatingly silent. My dad was just winding up a speech comparing me to my perfect sister, while the rest of the relatives nodded like bobbleheads, ready to watch me crumble under their collective judgment. But then, just as I felt that familiar, heavy weight starting to crush me, my mom's phone buzzed. And the notification on her screen, it didn't just change everything, it completely exploded the entire premise of their little gathering, right there in front of everyone. Have you ever been judged so harshly, so completely, before anyone even bothered to understand what you were actually building? That was my life. That's what happened right before that single Wall Street Journal notification ripped through the air and flipped my entire world upside down. Growing up in the Bennett household, success wasn't just a concept, it was a rigid, unforgiving definition etched in stone. My father, Gregory, a cardiothoracic surgeon whose precision in the operating room mirrored his precision in life, and my mother, Diana, a tenured professor of economics, had crafted an environment where achievement wasn't merely encouraged, it was absolutely, non-negotiably expected. Our family dinners weren't about bonding, they were curated showcases of academic accomplishments, professional milestones, and meticulously charted paths toward what they deemed conventional success. From a very early age, I showed glaring signs of thinking differently. While my sister, Emily, would meticulously follow every single instruction on her science projects, producing perfect, predictable results, I was over in my corner, constantly reimagining them entirely. I wasn't just building, I was questioning, dissecting, recreating. I remember, in 5th grade, when I suggested a completely radical approach to my science fair project, my father just smiled that tight, strained smile. "Rachel," he said, his voice laced with thinly veiled disapproval. "Sometimes the tried and true path is best. Look at how well Emily's project turned out when she just followed the instructions." That became a refrain, a constant, irritating hum throughout my childhood. My creative thinking, my out-of-the-box approach, was systematically positioned as a liability, never an asset. It stung. Deeply. Despite that subtle, constant invalidation, I still somehow excelled academically. I pushed through, graduated with honors from Stanford, double majoring in computer science and biomedical engineering. My parents, naturally, beamed with pride at my graduation. Oh, they already had my entire future mapped out, Google, Apple, maybe even following in my father's medical footsteps. The path, to them, seemed glaringly clear: land a prestigious company, climb that corporate ladder, achieve stability and recognition in a well-established, safe field. And for 2 years I tried. I really did. I landed a coveted position at a major tech firm, working on their healthcare initiatives. The salary? Impressive. The benefits? Exceptional. My parents finally had something straightforward, something respectable, to brag about at their country club gatherings. "Our Rachel works at TechnoLife, developing healthcare algorithms," my mother would chirp, conveniently glossing over the growing, gnawing discontent eating away at me. I was good at it, but it felt empty. The breaking point shattered during a particularly draining project where I witnessed, firsthand, the agonizing struggles of patients with rare diseases. They were desperately trying to find appropriate specialists, trying to access vital clinical trials. The systems in place were a chaotic mess, fragmented, outdated, horrifically inefficient. Patients were, quite literally, dying while navigating these bureaucratic mazes, lost in a sea of red tape. I saw it. I couldn't unsee it. And in that moment, a fire ignited within me. I saw an opportunity to create something truly profound, something that could actually save lives, an AI-driven platform designed to match patients with rare conditions to the right specialists and clinical trials, cutting through months, even years, of painful, often fruitless searching. This wasn't just a business idea, it was a calling. When I finally announced my decision to leave my secure, shiny job and launch my own healthcare technology startup, My family's reaction was exactly what you'd expect, mixed, to put it mildly. My mother, bless her heart, offered cautious support. "If anyone can make it work, it's you, Rachel. Just make sure you have a backup plan." My father, however, was less than enthusiastic. "The healthcare industry isn't something you can disrupt overnight. It's complex for a reason," he lectured, his tone dripping with skepticism. Emily, already climbing the ranks at her high-powered law firm, just offered a single, pointed question. "Does your company offer health insurance?" In those fleeting early days, there was at least a thin veneer of support. My parents actually attended my modest launch party. My father even wrote a check for my initial seed funding, though he made sure to call it an investment, rather than a gift, complete with paperwork and meticulously calculated projected returns. A transaction, not a gesture of faith. I named the company Connect Care. My co-founder was Jasmine Washington, a brilliant programmer I'd worked with at Technolife, who shared my burning vision, my absolute conviction that we could change things. We rented a tiny, cramped office space that, more often than not, doubled as our apartment, when we were too late to even think about going home. Those first months were an exhilarating blur. The sheer freedom to build something truly meaningful. The endless late nights, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer adrenaline, coding and refining our algorithm. The electrifying moments of breakthrough when a particularly difficult problem finally yielded to our relentless persistence. We were exhausted, yes, but we were alive. My boyfriend at the time, Timothy Clark, initially seemed supportive. He was an investment banker who, frankly, liked the idea of dating an entrepreneur, at least in theory. "My girlfriend, the next female tech founder to make it big," he'd boast, introducing me at parties, basking in my reflected potential. But as months bled into a year without significant external validation of our work, his enthusiasm waned. Sharply. "I thought this was going to be more of a quick success story," he admitted during one of our increasingly frequent, increasingly bitter arguments. "I'm starting to worry you're just throwing away your potential." He couldn't see the grind, the fight, only the lack of immediate, flashy returns. The first year was challenging, intensely so, but it wasn't unexpectedly difficult. We managed to secure modest funding from a few angel investors genuinely interested in healthcare innovation. We painstakingly built our initial platform and began beta testing with a small, carefully selected group of patients. The feedback? Promising. We were making real connections that genuinely helped people. But the path to profitability remained maddeningly unclear, and regulatory hurdles popped up at every single turn, like a cruel game of whack-a-mole. By the second year, the cracks began to show. 2 major funding rounds, the ones we poured our hearts and souls into, fell through at the absolute last minute. Our algorithm, though groundbreaking, still needed significant refinement to handle the sheer complexity of matching rare disease presentations with the incredibly specific, often obscure trials. The regulatory landscape, we quickly learned, proved even more nightmarish than we'd anticipated. Timothy, predictably, finally left. He said he needed someone more stable in his life. The rejection stung, but honestly it was almost a relief. My family's initial, fragile support had by then curdled into outright concern, then, finally, into full-blown criticism. Sunday dinners, once a rare moment of peace, transformed into aggressive interrogations about burn rates and user acquisition costs. Holiday gatherings, meant for joy, devolved into impromptu board meetings where relatives who couldn't even explain what an API was nonetheless felt completely qualified to critique our entire business model. Emily's steady, predictable rise through her law firm provided a convenient, brutal counterpoint to my struggling venture. Emily just bought a condo in the city. My mother would casually mention, just as I was still eating instant ramen in my shared office/apartment. What my family, what everyone around me, simply couldn't, or wouldn't, see were the small, quiet victories accumulating beneath the surface. A breakthrough in our matching algorithm that increased accuracy by a staggering 37%. A successful pilot program with a mid-sized hospital in Chicago, proving our concept in a real-world setting. Promising results from a clinical trial where our platform had connected patients to genuinely life-changing treatments. Jasmine and I knew, deep in our bones, that we were on to something profoundly important. If only we could just secure enough runway, enough time, to truly prove it. The family dinners became increasingly, agonizingly uncomfortable as Connect Care struggled to find stable footing. Each Sunday at my parents' sprawling colonial home in the suburbs, I'd brace myself for the inevitable interrogation. How's the little startup going? My father would ask the word startup, somehow sounding diminutive, dismissive, coming from his lips. Before I could properly answer, he'd pivot, inevitably. Emily just won the Dalton case. $3 million settlement. My sister would modestly lower her eyes, feigning humility, though I never missed a faint, knowing smile that played at the corners of her mouth. Emily, 3 years my senior, had always been the family standard-bearer. Her path had been so linear, so predictable, top of her class at Yale Law, a prestigious clerkship with a federal judge, and now, a rapid, unhindered ascent at Sullivan & Morgan, one of Boston's most prestigious firms. She was everything they wanted me to be. Thanksgiving that year was particularly brutal. As relatives passed the turkey and cranberry sauce, Aunt Patricia, with exaggerated concern, turned to me. "Are you still doing that computer thing, dear?" I saw a position at Mass General in their administration department. Very stable. Excellent benefits. I gritted my teeth. "I'm building a healthcare platform that connects patients with rare diseases to specialists and clinical trials," I explained, for what felt like the 100th time. "We're making real progress." Uncle Frank, never one to miss a beat, chimed in. "But are you making real money?" The table erupted in laughter, a chorus of mockery, while I just pushed mashed potatoes around my plate, my throat tight with humiliation. The crescendo, the final, brutal act, came when Emily announced a promotion to partner during Christmas dinner. Crystal champagne flutes appeared as if by magic, and my father gave a speech that brought tears to my mother's eyes. "Your mother and I always knew you were destined for greatness," he declared, raising his glass high to Emily. "You've made us so proud by choosing a path of excellence, and seeing it through." I clapped along with everyone else, genuinely happy for my sister, despite the implicit, crushing comparison. When my father caught my eye across the table, he added, almost as an afterthought, "And Rachel, we're sure you'll find your footing, too, once you're ready to get serious." The words were a physical blow, a dismissal of everything I was fighting for. January brought a new crisis, a devastating one. Our primary server crashed, taking our entire platform offline for 3 crucial, agonizing days. We lost a potential partnership with a major research hospital, a deal that could have been our salvation. As a result, our bank account was dwindling dangerously low, and payroll for our small, dedicated team of 5 loomed large, a terrifying prospect. After exhausting every other option, I swallowed my pride, a bitter pill, and called my father. We met at his country club, a place that always felt alien to me. He sipped his scotch, listening to my desperate pitch with clinical, chilling detachment. "So, you need $50,000 to bridge until your next funding round?" he clarified, examining me over his glasses, the way he might assess a resident's questionable diagnosis. "It's a loan, not a gift," I emphasized, my voice tight. "We have a meeting with Horizon Ventures next month. Their portfolio specifically focuses on healthcare technology, and they've expressed serious interest." My father set down his glass, a clink of finality. "Rachel, I've supported your adventure for 2 years now. Your mother and I are concerned that you're trapped in a cycle of almost, but never quite making it. Have you considered that it might be time to cut your losses?" My heart sank. "Dad, we're so close to a breakthrough. Our algorithm is performing better than anything on the market. We just need a little more time." He sighed heavily. "I'll discuss it with your mother, but I think what you need isn't more money. It's a reality check." 2 days later, a text from my mother. "Family emergency meeting this Saturday at 4 p.m. Please come to the house. It's important." When I called to ask what was happening, she was evasive, her voice tight with discomfort. "Your father feels we all need to talk about your situation. Emily will be there, too." My stomach churned. An intervention. They were going to tell me to quit. That night, I stayed late at our office, fueled by anger and a desperate hope, working on refinements to our matching algorithm. At 2 a.m., in the quiet pre-dawn hours, I had a breakthrough. A monumental one. An improvement that increased our accuracy to nearly 95% for certain rare conditions. I texted Jasmine, who called me immediately, despite the ungodly hour. "This could be it, Rachel," she said, her voice vibrating with pure excitement. "With this improvement, we can finally demonstrate real clinical impact at scale." "I know," I whispered, a strange, overwhelming mixture of elation and dread swirling inside me. "But my family's called some kind of intervention about the business for Saturday. They're going to try to convince me to shut it down." There was a heavy pause on the line. Are you considering it? Jasmine finally asked, her voice careful, fragile. I stared at my computer screen, where the results of our latest simulation showed unprecedented accuracy in matching patients with myasthenia gravis to appropriate clinical trials. The data screamed potential. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Part of me is so tired of fighting everyone, my ex, my family, investors who just don't get our vision. But what about the patients? Jasmine asked quietly. What about Eliza? She was referring to a 12-year-old with a rare form of muscular dystrophy who had accessed a life-changing clinical trial through our platform during the Chicago pilot. I closed my eyes, remembering Eliza's mother's tearful video call, thanking us, truly thanking us, for giving her daughter a chance when traditional medical channels had utterly failed them. I know, I whispered. I just need to get through this family meeting. One last time to see if I can make them understand. And if not, we'll figure it out. Jasmine promised. We always do. Saturday arrived too quickly. As I drove to my parents' house, the autumn leaves a blur outside my window. I rehearsed explanations, justifications, pleas. Words I knew would likely fall on deaf ears. Whatever happened at this emergency meeting, I sensed it would mark a turning point. A dramatic, irreversible one. Though I had no idea just how earth-shattering that turn would be. I pulled into my parents' circular driveway at exactly 4 p.m. on Saturday, my stomach tightening immediately as I noticed more cars than I'd expected. This wasn't just my immediate family. There were at least 5 additional vehicles. My heart hammered against my ribs as I recognized Uncle Frank's Mercedes and Aunt Patricia's monstrous SUV. This wasn't a meeting. It was an ambush. A public execution of my dreams. The front door opened before I could even ring the bell. My mother stood there, her expression a complicated, unsettling mixture of sympathy and grim determination. Rachel, sweetie, she said, hugging me briefly, a perfunctory gesture devoid of real warmth. Everyone's waiting in the living room. Everyone? I echoed, my voice barely steady. Mom, what exactly is happening here? She avoided my eyes, her gaze skittering away. Your father feels it's important that we all talk openly about your situation. My blood ran cold. The living room fell utterly silent as I entered. The scene was surreal, like walking into my own intervention on a daytime talk show. My father stood by the fireplace, clearly positioned as the authority figure, the judge and jury. Emily sat primly on the sofa, a legal pad balanced on her knee, looking impeccably professional, utterly unaffected. Around the room, strategically placed in various armchairs and love seats, were Aunt Patricia and Uncle Frank, my father's colleague Dr. Winston and his wife Margaret, my godmother Judith, and to my absolute shock, my mother's financial advisor, Bradley. What is this? I asked, remaining standing despite the conspicuously empty seat placed directly across from my father, clearly meant for me. My father cleared his throat, his voice perfectly controlled. Rachel, please sit down. We've gathered as a family because we're concerned about the path you've chosen. And Bradley is family now? I shot back, nodding toward the financial advisor who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, a faint flush creeping up his neck. Bradley is here to offer professional perspective. My father responded smoothly. Please sit. Reluctantly, I took the seat, feeling like a defendant facing a biased jury. My father had clearly rehearsed his speech. For 2 years, we've supported your entrepreneurial experiment. We've watched you pour your savings, your time, your relationships, and your formidable talents into a venture that shows no signs of viability. As a family, we can no longer stand by while you waste your potential and jeopardize your future. Uncle Frank nodded vigorously, a vulture agreeing with its pack leader. Your father asked me to look at your business plan, Rachel. The burn rate is unsustainable without significant investment, which hasn't materialized after 2 years. That's usually a market signal. You showed him our confidential business documents? I asked my father, incredulity lacing my voice. I showed him what you showed me when you asked for $50,000. My father replied, completely unbothered. And Frank agrees. The outlook isn't promising. Aunt Patricia leaned forward, her voice dripping with saccharine concern. Honey, no one's saying you aren't smart or hardworking, but sometimes the smartest thing is knowing when to cut your losses. I have a friend at Massachusetts General Hospital. I don't want to work at Mass General. I interrupted, my composure fraying. Our platform is finally showing real clinical impact. We're helping patients with rare diseases find treatments that could save their lives. But is it financially viable? Bradley asked gently, his tone like a soft hammer. Even the most altruistic venture needs a sustainable model. We're pre-revenue by design, I explained, feeling like I was speaking a foreign language they couldn't possibly understand. We're building the network and refining the algorithm before full-scale monetization. It's standard for this type of platform. Dr. Winston, his face etched with a grave disapproval, shook his head. I've seen many medical innovations fail, not because they weren't good ideas, but because they couldn't navigate the regulatory landscape and the financial realities of healthcare. My godmother, Judith, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke, her voice softer, but no less pointed. Rachel, we're worried about you personally too. Timothy was such a lovely young man, and your mother tells me you hardly date anymore. You're working all hours, living in your office. Timothy left because he wanted to date a status symbol, not an actual person with ambitions. I retorted, my last threads of composure snapping. And my personal life isn't up for family debate. Emily, who had been scribbling notes, with an unsettling calm, looked up. I've taken the liberty of drafting some options for you, she said, her tone professionally sympathetic, infuriatingly superior. I have contacts at several tech firms who would be interested in someone with your background. You could leverage your startup experience as an asset rather than a liability in the job market. That's very thoughtful, Emily, I said tightly, my voice a thin wire. But I'm not looking for a job. I have one. I'm the CEO of a company that's doing important work. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, touched my arm, her touch hesitant. Sweetheart, we know you believe in what you're doing, but you've always been so idealistic. Sometimes reality doesn't match our dreams. And that's not failure, it's life. I looked around the room, at these people who claimed to love me, yet couldn't, or wouldn't, see or respect the vision that drove me, that consumed me. Our algorithm just achieved 95% matching accuracy for certain conditions, I stated, my voice shaking with raw passion. Do you know what that means? It means patients who would otherwise spend years searching for appropriate treatment can find it in days. It means lives saved. My father sighed heavily, a theatrical exhalation. Rachel, everyone wants to save the world when they're young, but there are established channels for medical innovation for a reason. If your idea had merit, wouldn't the market have validated it by now? The market is broken, I insisted, my voice rising. That's exactly why we're building this. And we do have validation, from patients, from doctors at our pilot hospitals, from clinical researchers. But not from investors with actual money. My father countered, his tone cutting. Not from people who understand business rather than idealism. Emily nodded in agreement, her gaze unwavering. Rachel, I admire your passion, but passion doesn't pay bills. I've worked systematically toward partnership for 8 years. It took discipline, strategic choices, and sometimes putting aside what I wanted in the moment for the bigger picture. My father gestured toward Emily, his face lighting up with unmistakable pride, a warmth he'd never shown for my achievements. Exactly. Your sister made partner while you play entrepreneur. The words hit me like physical blows, each one a hammer strike to my chest. The room fell into an uncomfortably heavy silence as everyone absorbed the brutal harshness of my father's statement. I felt tears threatening, hot and stinging, but I refused to let them fall. I stood up, gathering my purse, my hands trembling. I think we're done here, I said quietly, my voice raw but steady. Rachel, don't be dramatic. My father started, his voice a condescending drawl. We're trying to help you. No, I responded, finding a sudden, searing strength in the absolute clarity of the moment. You're trying to make me into something I'm not. You've never understood what I'm building because you've never really tried to understand. My mother looked pained, her face etched with a helpless sorrow. Rachel, please. Your father just wants what's best for you. He wants what he thinks is best for me. I corrected, my voice firm. There's a difference. As I turned to leave, the strangest thing happened. My mother's phone buzzed loudly in her pocket. She automatically reached for it, glancing down at the notification. Her expression, in that instant, transformed from concern to utter confusion, then to wide-eyed shock. Diana, we're in the middle of something important. My father admonished, his voice sharp with impatience. But my mother wasn't listening. She was staring at her phone screen, then looking up at me, her eyes widening, her mouth slightly agape. Gregory, she said slowly, her voice a disbelieving whisper. You might want to see this. What could possibly be more important than this family discussion? My father asked impatiently, a dangerous edge in his tone. My mother looked directly at me, her gaze piercing, as she read aloud from her phone. Why is your company valued at $1 billion? In the Wall Street Journal. The room froze. Every single eye in that room, from Emily to Bradley, swiveled to me, expressions ranging from absolute confusion to outright disbelief. What? I managed, my voice barely audible, a pathetic croak. My mother looked back at her phone, blinking rapidly, as if trying to clear her vision. It's a Wall Street Journal news alert. Healthcare startup Connect Care valued at $1 billion in potential acquisition talks with Pharmatech Global. She looked up at me again, a raw question in her eyes. Rachel, is this your company? I couldn't process what I was hearing. Pharmatech Global was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the entire world. And while we had been in early, very preliminary discussions with their innovation department about potential collaboration, nothing remotely close to acquisition talks had ever been mentioned, let alone a $1 billion valuation. I need to see that, I said, crossing the room in 3 quick, trembling strides. My mother handed me her phone, and I stared at the headline in pure, unadulterated disbelief. Emily was already pulling out her own phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Is this some kind of mistake? She asked, the professional skepticism in her voice unable to completely mask her utter shock. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the article. According to the Wall Street Journal's healthcare technology reporter, Malene Torres, Pharmatech Global was in advanced talks to acquire Connect Care for an estimated $1 billion, primarily for our revolutionary patient matching algorithm that demonstrates unprecedented accuracy in connecting rare disease patients with appropriate clinical trials. The article went on to quote an unnamed source within Pharmatech, saying that our technology could revolutionize clinical trial recruitment and potentially save the pharmaceutical industry billions in failed trial costs, while dramatically accelerating rare disease treatment development. As I read, several things registered simultaneously. My phone, tucked away in my purse, was vibrating constantly, a frantic buzzing. The room around me had erupted into confused, hushed chatter, a sudden cacophony of questions. And my father had moved to read over my shoulder, his expression shifting from utter dismissal to stunned astonishment, a horrifying realization dawning on his face. Rachel, he said, his voice entirely different now, almost reverent. Is this accurate? I finally checked my own phone. 17 missed calls from Jasmine. 5 from our lawyer, Samuel. 3 from a number I didn't recognize, with a New York area code. Dozens of text messages and email notifications, an avalanche of digital proof. I don't know. I admitted, my head spinning. We've been in talks with Pharmatech about a potential partnership, but nothing like this. I needed to call Jasmine. Now. I stepped out onto the porch, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I dialed my business partner. She answered on the first ring. Rachel, finally. Have you seen it? Jasmine's voice was pitched higher than normal, vibrating with raw excitement. The Wall Street Journal article. Yes, I just saw it. What's happening, Jasmine? We weren't in acquisition talks. We are now, she said breathlessly. Daniel Rodriguez from Pharmatech called right after our breakthrough last night. He said their team has been monitoring our progress, and the accuracy improvements put us over their threshold for serious interest. When I told him we were hitting 95% match rates for certain conditions, he almost fell off his chair. I gripped the porch railing for support, the cold metal anchoring me to reality. But $1 billion? That's insane. It's our algorithm, Rachel. Jasmine explained rapidly, her words tumbling out. You know how Pharmatech spent $3.7 billion on clinical trials last year, and how over 80% of trials failed to recruit enough patients. Our system solves their most expensive problem. Daniel said their internal valuation shows we could save them more than $2 billion annually while accelerating their drug development pipeline by years. My mind flashed back to all those late nights, the endless iterations of code, the countless meetings with patients and doctors, desperately trying to understand the real-world problems we were trying to solve. All those moments when we felt like we were shouting into the void, trying to convince everyone that what we were building truly mattered. But how did the Wall Street Journal find out? I asked, a fresh wave of panic washing over me. We haven't agreed to anything. That's the thing, Jasmine said, her voice dropping, suddenly serious. I think Pharmatech leaked it. Samuel thinks they're trying to establish a public valuation to justify the purchase to their board and shareholders. He's been going crazy trying to reach you. I glanced back through the window at my family, who were now huddled around Emily's phone, presumably reading the full article, their faces a mixture of awe and bewilderment. I'm at my parents' house, I told Jasmine, a bitter laugh bubbling up. They were staging an intervention to convince me to shut down the company. Jasmine was silent for a moment. You're kidding. I wish I was, I said, a strange mix of emotions swirling. My father just told everyone that my sister made partner while I play entrepreneur. Then my mom got the news alert. Oh my God, Jasmine whispered, a note of grim amusement in her voice. That's actually kind of perfect timing, despite everything. I smiled, a genuine, wild grin. It really is. Then, becoming serious again. I'll head to the office now. Call Samuel and tell him I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I stepped back into the living room, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The air, once thick with judgment, now crackled with an almost tangible sense of awe. My father was on his phone, furiously scrolling, apparently reading the article himself, his face pale with shock. Emily was, with an almost comical speed, explaining something about unicorn valuations to our bewildered aunt and uncle. My mother was simply staring at me, her wide eyes reflecting an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. I need to go, I announced, my voice cutting through the confused chatter. There's apparently a situation I need to address with my team. My father looked up, his voice hushed, almost timid. Rachel, why didn't you tell us your company was in talks with Pharmatech Global? Because we weren't in acquisition talks until, apparently, today. I replied honestly, trying to keep the triumph out of my voice. And even our partnership discussions were under NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Emily translated for the room, unnecessarily. Bradley, the financial advisor who had been ready to explain why my business was doomed mere minutes earlier, now stepped forward with an outstretched hand, a forced, oily smile on his face. Congratulations, Rachel. What an extraordinary achievement. I didn't take his hand. Thank you, but I really need to go. Of course. My father said quickly, suddenly solicitous. This is obviously an important business matter. We didn't mean to keep you from something so significant. The irony was almost too much to bear. I looked around at the room full of people who had gathered specifically to convince me to abandon my vision, to shut down the thing I had poured my life into. Actually, that's exactly what this meeting was designed to do, I said quietly, letting the words hang in the suddenly silent air. My father had the grace to look profoundly uncomfortable. Rachel, we were concerned. We didn't have all the information. No, I agreed, my voice cold. You didn't. But you were quite comfortable making judgments anyway. I turned to leave, then paused, turning back one last time. I'll let you all know how things develop. Right now, I need to speak with my team and our lawyers. As I walked out the door, I heard my mother call after me. Rachel, wait. She hurried down the front steps after me, catching my arm. I just want to say, I'm proud of you. I always have been. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, but also remembering her silence, her complicity, during my father's cruel dismissal of my work. Thanks, Mom, I said simply, unable to fully process my complicated, swirling feelings in that moment. As I drove toward our office, my phone continued to buzz with notifications, a constant symphony of triumph. The story was spreading like wildfire, beyond the Wall Street Journal now, with TechCrunch, Bloomberg, and other major outlets picking it up. Our website traffic had increased by 3,000% in the past hour alone. I thought about all the times I doubted myself over the past 2 years, the crushing weight of that self-doubt. The nights I'd lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if everyone else was right, if I was being foolishly idealistic, if I was truly wasting my potential. I thought about Timothy walking out, saying he needed someone more stable. I thought about my father's dismissive tone, the way he talked about my little startup, belittling my entire existence. Then I thought about Eliza, the 12-year-old who had accessed a life-changing clinical trial through our platform. I thought about Jasmine's unwavering, almost ferocious belief in our vision, even when investors turned us down, again and again. I thought about the breakthrough we'd achieved just last night, not knowing it would trigger this tsunami, this seismic shift in my life. My entire world was about to change, I realized. And ironically, it was happening just hours after my family had gathered to stage an intervention about my supposed failure. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of conference calls, emergency meetings, and hastily arranged flights. Our tiny office, once a quiet sanctuary of innovation, transformed into a frenetic command center as we brought in our lawyers, financial advisors, and key team members to address the sudden, blinding spotlight on Connect Care. The first call with Daniel Rodriguez of Pharmatech confirmed what Jasmine had told me. They were, indeed, incredibly serious about acquisition talks, though they hadn't intended for the news to leak quite so dramatically. Their legal team was handling the premature disclosure, but now that the cat was out of the bag, they wanted to accelerate our discussions. Your timing couldn't have been better with your algorithm breakthrough, Daniel said during our video conference, his voice buzzing with urgency. Our clinical research team validated your results this morning. It's exactly what we've been looking for. By Sunday evening, less than 24 hours after the intervention, we had a preliminary term sheet from Pharmatech outlining a potential acquisition valued at $950 million in cash and stock options. Samuel, our lawyer, a veteran of these kinds of battles, pointed out that this was slightly less than the billion-dollar figure mentioned in the media. They're testing to see if the publicity has gone to your heads, he explained, a wry smile on his face. Standard negotiation tactic. They know the technology is worth more than this, especially with the publicity driving up perceived value. Jasmine and I spent that night, red-eyed from lack of sleep, reviewing every single detail of Pharmatech's proposal. The question isn't just about the money, Jasmine said, her voice raspy. It's about control. If we sell outright, we can't guarantee they'll use the technology the way we intended. She was absolutely right. The algorithm we built wasn't just a clever piece of technology. It was a mission. A burning, vital mission to fundamentally change how patients with rare diseases access treatment. In the wrong hands, in the pursuit of pure profit, it could become just another tool for pharmaceutical maximization, rather than patient benefit. That thought gnawed at me. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Second cousins, my father's former colleagues, even Timothy tried to reach me. His text message was a masterpiece of casual reconnection, making no mention of how he'd walked out when things got tough. Heard about your success. Always knew you had it in you. Coffee sometime? I left it unanswered, a satisfying silence. My mother called 3 times before I finally picked up Monday afternoon. Rachel, we just want to know you're okay, she said, her voice tentative, almost hesitant. It's been all over the news. Your father's colleagues are calling to ask about you. I'm fine, Mom, I replied, trying, and probably failing, to keep the edge from my voice. Just extremely busy. Of course, she said quickly. We don't want to bother you. But your father would like to talk to you. He feels terrible about Saturday. I closed my eyes, remembering the look on his face as he proclaimed that Emily had made partner while I played entrepreneur. The memory still stung deeply, despite everything that had happened since. I can't talk to him right now, I said finally, my voice firm. I'm in the middle of the most important business negotiations of my life. Tell him I'll call when things settle down. There was a pause. He's very proud of you, Rachel. Now he is, I couldn't help saying, the bitterness creeping in. Now that other people have validated what I'm doing. My mother didn't argue the point. Will you at least let us know what you decide about the acquisition? Yes, I promised. I'll keep you updated. That evening, as Jasmine and I were reviewing a counter-proposal with Samuel, there was a tentative knock at our office door. To my astonishment, Emily stood there, holding a bottle of champagne and looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Your secretary let me up, she explained, though we didn't actually have a secretary, a small detail I decided to overlook. I thought you might need a break and maybe some legal perspective from someone who's on your side. I hesitated, still feeling the sting of her participation in the intervention, her carefully drafted job options. I brought the good stuff, she added, lifting the champagne bottle, a glint of genuine humor in her eyes. Dom Perignon, partner-level celebration material. Despite myself, I smiled. Come in. Emily sat with us for the next 3 hours, reviewing Pharmatech's terms with the sharp, forensic eye of a corporate attorney. She pointed out several clauses that would have severely limited our future involvement with the technology after acquisition, effectively sidelining us. If maintaining control of how your technology is used matters to you, she said, looking between Jasmine and me, her expression serious. You should be pushing for a partnership structure, not a complete acquisition. Let them license the technology while you maintain ownership and oversight. Jasmine looked at me, eyebrows raised in surprise. That's actually brilliant. It would mean less money up front, Emily cautioned. But potentially more control and more long-term value if the technology performs as well as you believe it will. I studied my sister, truly seeing her in a new light. Why are you helping us like this? Emily set down her champagne glass, her gaze direct. Because I was wrong, she said simply. I bought into Dad's perspective without really understanding what you were building. And because you're my sister, and I don't want you to get screwed in the biggest deal of your life just because tech acquisitions are my specialty. A grudging respect bloomed in me. The next morning, armed with Emily's insights, we presented a counter-proposal to Pharmatech, a strategic partnership instead of an outright acquisition, with a licensing structure that would provide immediate capital while allowing us to maintain control over the core technology and its implementation. To our surprise, Daniel Rodriguez didn't immediately reject the idea. Let me take this to the board, he said. They were interested in acquisition for the simplified structure, but your technology is unique enough that they might consider alternatives. On Wednesday afternoon, my father appeared at our office. He stood awkwardly in the reception area, looking utterly out of place among the whiteboards covered in dense code and the young programmers rushing about. Rachel, he said, his voice hesitant when I emerged from my office. Could we speak privately? I led him to a small conference room and closed the door. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence was thick with unspoken regrets. I owe you an apology, he finally said, his gaze fixed on the table. I was wrong about your company, about your vision. Yes, you were, I agreed, not making it easy for him. He nodded, accepting this, a rare humility in his posture. I've spent my career working within established systems. When you talked about disrupting healthcare matching, I couldn't see it because I've only ever experienced the traditional pathways. But I've been reading about what you've built. It's remarkable. Coming from my father, this was significant. Seismic even. Thank you, I said simply. Your mother and I. He hesitated, looking up. We were afraid for you. The startup world is so uncertain, and we've seen how hard you've been working with seemingly little to show for it. But that's how innovation works, Dad, I explained, trying to bridge the vast gap between our understandings. There's a long period where you're building and refining and testing, and nothing seems to be happening from the outside. Then suddenly everything changes. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. He looked directly at me. I just want you to know that regardless of what happens with Pharmatech, I am proud of what you've created. The words I'd wanted to hear for so long now felt bittersweet, tainted by the long, painful wait. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But I wish you could have been proud of the work itself, not just the valuation or the public recognition. My father looked down at his hands, a rare moment of introspection. That's fair. I have some learning to do about how I measure success. He looked up again, a flicker of something new in his eyes. For what it's worth, I think you should maintain control of your technology. From what I understand about your platform, it has the potential to help many patients. That shouldn't be lost in a corporate acquisition. As he left, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication, yes. Lingering hurt, absolutely. But also the first tentative, fragile steps toward a new, real understanding between us. That evening, Pharmatech came back with their response. They would agree to a partnership structure with a $500 million upfront payment for exclusive licensing rights, plus performance-based incentives that could ultimately exceed the original acquisition offer. Most importantly, Connect Care would maintain ownership of our core technology and have contractual guarantees about how it would be implemented, ensuring our mission remained paramount. Jasmine and I looked at each other across the conference table, exhaustion etched on our faces, but a spark of wild joy in our eyes. What do you think? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I thought about all we had built, all we had sacrificed. I thought about my family's intervention and the dramatic reversal that followed. I thought about patients like Eliza, who needed our technology to reach its full, life-saving potential. I think we've built something too important to sell completely, I said finally, the conviction solid in my heart. I think we take the partnership deal and keep building. Jasmine grinned, a wide, triumphant smile. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. 3 months later, Connect Care had transformed beyond all recognition. Our new headquarters occupied 3 gleaming floors of a sleek downtown building, a far cry from the cramped office apartment where Jasmine and I had spent countless sleepless nights. Our team had grown from 5 to 50, with specialized departments for algorithm development, patient advocacy, clinical partnerships, and regulatory compliance. The $500 million licensing payment from Pharmatech had provided immediate, vital stability while allowing us to maintain ownership and direction of our technology. The partnership structure had proven even more valuable than we anticipated. Pharmatech's global reach and regulatory expertise accelerated our implementation timeline by years, while our continued innovation kept improving the core matching algorithm, making it smarter, faster, more effective. Most importantly, we were helping patients. Within 3 months of our expanded launch, we had successfully matched over 5,000 patients with rare diseases to appropriate specialists or clinical trials. The testimonials flooded in daily, families who had spent years searching for answers, finally finding paths forward through our platform. It was humbling. It was everything. The personal changes were just as dramatic. I had purchased a comfortable condo in the city. Nothing ostentatious, but a genuine home, a sanctuary, rather than a converted office space with a mattress on the floor. Jasmine had paid off her parents' mortgage and set up college funds for her nieces and nephews. We were both still working intense hours, of course, but now from a place of choice, of passion, rather than desperate necessity. My relationship with my family had also evolved, morphing into something more complex, certainly, but ultimately, undeniably healthier. The monthly dinners at my parents' house had resumed, but the dynamic had shifted significantly. "Pass the potatoes, will you, Rachel?" my father asked during one such dinner in June, a genuine curiosity in his voice. "I was reading about your expansion into European markets." "Thanks, Dad," I said, passing the dish. "Our compliance team has been working closely with the EU health authorities. It's complex, but we're making progress." Emily, who had recently taken on some pro bono work for patient advocacy groups, chimed in, genuinely interested. "The European privacy laws around patient data are particularly challenging. How are you handling the GDPR compliance?" The conversation flowed easily into a technical discussion of international healthcare regulations, territory where my father and sister were genuinely interested and engaged, rather than dismissive. My mother watched with a small, contented smile, occasionally contributing but mostly seeming content to witness this new, more balanced family dynamic. After dinner, my father invited me into his study. Once an intimidating space where he would deliver assessments of my life choices, now it felt like more neutral territory. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation when I came to your office," he said, settling into his worn leather chair. "About measuring success differently." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I read about a patient in Cleveland who accessed an experimental treatment through your platform," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "A 7-year-old with progressive muscular atrophy who had been declined for 3 previous trials. The article mentioned that doctors estimated she would have had less than a year left without this treatment." "Sophie Richardson," I confirmed, her case seared into my memory. "Her case was particularly challenging because her genetic variant didn't fit the typical profile. Our algorithm identified subtle patterns that matched her with a trial that had more flexible inclusion criteria." My father was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "That's the kind of success that matters, isn't it? Not just valuations and acquisitions. It's why we built Connect Care," I said simply. "The business success enables us to help more patients, but the patients are the point." He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that better." He cleared his throat, a hint of a mischievous glint in his eye. "Your old boyfriend called me at the hospital last week." "Timothy?" I asked, surprised, a flicker of annoyance. "Yes. Apparently, he couldn't reach you directly, wanted to reconnect, and thought I might facilitate." My father's expression was carefully neutral, but I detected a hint of something protective, almost paternal, that made my heart ache. "And what did you tell him?" A small smile played at the corner of my father's mouth. "I told him, my daughter is running a successful global healthcare platform and is extremely selective about her time commitments." I couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, unburdened laugh. "Thank you for that." The doorbell rang and moments later, my mother appeared at the study door. "Rachel, there's a Marlene Torres here to see you. She says you were expecting her." Malene Torres, the Wall Street Journal reporter whose article had changed everything, had reached out requesting an interview about the profound impact of Connect Care's technology on rare disease treatment. After careful consideration, I had agreed, suggesting she join us for dessert after our family dinner. Yes, we had arranged to meet here, I confirmed, standing up. She's writing a follow-up piece. My father raised his eyebrows, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. Brave to invite the press to a family gathering. I smiled. I think we can handle it. Malene turned out to be nothing like the intimidating media personality I had imagined. In her early 30s, with curly hair and bright, intelligent eyes, she asked thoughtful questions about both the technology and the deeply human impact of our work. What surprised me about your story, she said as we settled in the living room with coffee and my mother's legendary apple pie, was how you maintained control rather than taking the larger acquisition offer. That's unusual in the tech world, especially for a first-time founder. The technology we built serves a specific purpose, I explained. We were concerned that purpose might get lost in a complete acquisition. Rachel has always been principled. My mother interjected proudly, a warmth in her voice that was new, undeniable. Malene smiled. And how has the partnership structure worked out in practice? Better than we anticipated, I admitted. Pharmatech brings resources and reach that would have taken us years to develop independently, while we maintain the core innovation that makes the system effective. And the personal impact? Malene asked, her gaze direct. Your life must have changed dramatically over the past few months. I considered this. Externally, yes, we had proper offices now, a growing team, financial stability. But the core of what we're doing, connecting patients with life-changing treatments, that's the same mission we started with. That hasn't changed. As the evening wound down, Emily walked Malene out while I helped my mother clear the dessert plates. You handled that interview beautifully, my mother said, rinsing a cup. Very poised. Thanks, Mom, I replied. It gets easier with practice. She set down the cup and turned to face me, her expression serious. I want to apologize again for that intervention. We were so wrong. And in such a public, hurtful way. I leaned against the counter, the raw wound of that day still present. Why didn't you say anything that day, before the Wall Street Journal notification? You just sat there while Dad and everyone else picked apart my choices. My mother sighed deeply. I was caught between what your father believed was best and what I feared might be true. I was worried about you, working so hard with so little recognition, so much struggle. But I should have spoken up. I know that now. You should have. I agreed, the words coming out more gently than I expected. I know, she said quietly, her eyes filled with regret. But I want you to know I always believed in you, Rachel, even when I was afraid for you. I reached out and squeezed her hand. I know, Mom. And we're finding a better way forward now. Later that night, as I drove back to my condo, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months. The technology we had built was helping people in ways we had always envisioned, but had struggled so desperately to make others see. The validation had come, both financially and in terms of tangible impact, but the vindication felt less important now than the profound satisfaction of the work itself. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Just got the European regulatory preliminary approval. We can start the EU pilot next month. Another milestone reached. Another massive step toward the vision we had held on to through 2 incredibly difficult years of doubt and dismissal. As I pulled into my parking space, I felt a deep, profound sense of gratitude, not just for the success, but for the struggle that had shaped both our technology and my own unshakable resilience along the way. 1 year after that Wall Street Journal article changed absolutely everything, Connect Care had evolved beyond what Jasmine and I had dared to imagine in those frantic early days, working from our converted apartment office. Our patient matching platform, now operated in 12 countries, had facilitated over 20,000 rare disease treatment connections, and had become the undeniable gold standard for clinical trial recruitment. The financial success was undeniable. Our partnership with Pharmatech had consistently exceeded performance metrics, triggering additional payments that brought our total compensation close to the original billion-dollar valuation. Jasmine and I had both become wealthy by any reasonable standard, though we remained actively and passionately involved in the company's operations and strategic direction. But the true measure of our success wasn't in bank accounts or valuations. It was in emails, letters, and tearful video messages that arrived daily from patients and families whose lives had been transformed, fundamentally altered, through connections made on our platform. One Tuesday morning, I sat in our glass-walled conference room, reviewing quarterly performance data, when my assistant, Amanda, knocked gently. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "A Sophia Richardson and her mother. They don't have an appointment, but they were very hoping to meet you personally." I recognized the name immediately. The 7-year-old with progressive muscular atrophy, whose case I had mentioned to my father months earlier, the one he'd called a success that matters. "Please send them in," I said, closing my laptop, my heart already pounding. The girl who walked through the door looked nothing like the frail, fading child I had seen in medical files. Sophia Richardson had bright eyes, pink-tinged cheeks, and moved with the careful but determined steps of someone actively regaining strength, a vibrant energy radiating from her. Her mother, Catherine, followed close behind, her expression a mixture of raw gratitude and profound wonder. "Miss Bennett," Catherine began, her voice catching with emotion. "We just wanted to thank you in person. The clinical trial your system matched Sophia with, the doctors are calling her response miraculous." Sophia looked up at me solemnly, her small hand clutching her mother's. "Mom says your computer is magic and found the medicine that fixed my muscles." I knelt to her level, my eyes welling up. "Not magic, just very good at finding the right matches. But I'm so happy it helped you." "Me too," she said simply, a wide, joyful smile spreading across her face. "I can go to school now. And dance class starts next week." The Richardsons stayed for nearly an hour. Catherine explained the transformation in clinical terms, how the gene therapy they had accessed to our platform had not only halted the progression of Sophia's disease but had begun to reverse some of the damage. But it was the small details that moved me most: Sophia's bubbling excitement about joining a ballet class, her detailed plans for Halloween, the ordinary, beautiful childhood experiences that had seemed utterly impossible a year earlier. After they left, I sat quietly in my office, processing the encounter, a profound sense of peace settling over me. This was why we had persevered. Through 2 brutal years of doubt and dismissal. This was what my family hadn't been able to see when they gathered for their intervention. This was the beating heart of Connect Care. My phone rang. Emily calling. Our relationship had, in fact, evolved into something stronger and more equal over the past year. She had even helped establish a legal advocacy division within Connect Care that provided pro bono support to patients navigating insurance denials and treatment access issues. "Are we still on for dinner tonight?" she asked when I picked up. "Dad's presenting some award at the Medical Association, so it's just us." "Absolutely," I confirmed. "I just met Sophia Richardson and her mother. Remember that case I told you about, the 7-year-old? That's amazing, Rachel. Bring the details tonight. I want to hear everything." Later that evening, over dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, I told Emily about the Richardsons' visit. "It's extraordinary what you've built," she said when I finished, a genuine admiration in her eyes. "Not just the technology, but the entire ecosystem around it." "We've been lucky," I acknowledged, still humbled. Emily shook her head firmly. "No, that's what Dad would say to minimize what you've accomplished. This isn't luck. It's vision, persistence, and the sheer courage to keep going when everyone, including your own family, told you to stop." I smiled at her directness, her unwavering support. "When did you become my biggest defender?" "Probably around the time I realized how wrong I'd been," she admitted, a soft, rare vulnerability in her voice. "And watching you navigate this past year with such grace and focus? It's been inspiring. Honestly." We talked about the mentorship program I had recently established for women entrepreneurs in healthcare technology. 10 promising founders were receiving funding, guidance, and access to our network, resources that would have made all the difference during our own difficult early years. "I remember when you first told us you were leaving your job to start Connect Care," Emily said thoughtfully. "Dad was horrified, but I was secretly envious." This surprised me. "Envious? You were already on the partner track at a prestigious firm." "Exactly," she said, a new understanding dawning on me. "I was on a track someone else had laid out. You were creating something entirely new." She sipped her wine. "I never had the courage to deviate from the expected path." "It's not too late," I pointed out. "Your work with our legal advocacy division has made a huge difference for patients." She nodded slowly. "It has. It's the most meaningful work I've ever done. Our conversation shifted to family matters. Our father's gradual but significant evolution in how he viewed success, our mother's delight in telling her academic colleagues about Connect Care's profound impact, the upcoming holiday gatherings that no longer filled me with dread. As we were finishing dessert, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down and couldn't help but laugh. "What is it?" Emily asked, a knowing grin on her face. "Timothy again. Apparently, he's launched some kind of investment advisory service and wants to explore synergies with Connect Care." Emily rolled her eyes, a look of pure exasperation. "The audacity of mediocre men never ceases to amaze me." I put my phone away without responding. Timothy's reappearance in my life, or rather, his persistent attempts at it, had become a running joke between Jasmine and me. The man who couldn't see the value in what we were building when it truly mattered, now couldn't stop trying to associate himself with our success. Walking back to my car after dinner, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 years. The struggle that had seemed so lonely, so isolating at times, had ultimately led to something far more meaningful than just personal success. We had built a technology that was genuinely changing lives, a company culture that valued innovation and compassion equally, and a model for how healthcare technology could prioritize patient outcomes alongside business viability. The family intervention that had felt so incredibly painful, so utterly humiliating, had become, in retrospect, the dramatic turning point that launched us into a new, unimaginable phase of growth and impact. Sometimes, the lowest moments truly do precede the greatest breakthroughs. Back at home, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city lights, thinking about all the lessons this journey had taught me. True vision requires the courage to pursue what others cannot yet see. Validation from those who matter most sometimes comes later than we hope, but our worth doesn't depend on their recognition. Success isn't just about financial outcomes, but about the lives changed through our work. The path to meaningful innovation is rarely straight or smooth, and the darkest moments often come just before the light of breakthrough. And perhaps most importantly, we must define success on our own terms, rather than blindly accepting others' limited definitions. What dream are you pursuing that others might not understand yet? What vision keeps you going despite the doubters or the critics? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. We all need reminders that perseverance matters, especially when the path seems darkest. If this story resonated with you, thanks for watching. Take care. Good luck.